Hey guys, thanks for checking out another video here at Anarchapulco. I've got Spencer here. He's a speaker. He just finished his talk and we're going to sit here and have a chat. So thanks for watching and thanks for agreeing to do a video with me.
Thanks, Jeremy. So I've heard a lot of speakers here at Anarchapulco, and the idea obviously is we want to have more personal freedom. We want to have less interference from the state. And what the challenge is, as I see it, is that so many of us, not necessarily in this group, but in society at large, allow themselves to be suppressed and dominated by a few people at the top. So I'd like to talk to you about why I think that happens and what we can do about it. Now, as you look at animal groups, pack animals, because humans, we're pack animals, yeah? If you look at apes or you look at wolves, you're usually going to find a 20-to-1 ratio, 20 followers to 1 leader. And it always aims towards that ratio, because if there are too many followers and not enough leaders, then it's kind of chaotic. And if there's too many leaders and not enough followers, the leaders fight amongst themselves until there's one that survives. So it's always going to homeostatically close in on that 20-to-1 number. What I notice in society is that we've carried that into human society. We were pack animals once. We had that 20-to-1 ratio. You still see it in the military in terms of squadron and battalion size, that kind of ratio. So we are still running a genetic program that was very successful for us when we were tribal, and you had to have one guy who was the best hunter, calling the shots or how you were going to hunt the big game. It's not working in our society now. There's an unintended consequence of this. What it means is that 95% of men, whether they're aware of it or not, are running some degree of a vestigial beta program in their minds. You can even see this in people that you might think are very powerful. You might see a CEO, a very powerful guy, right? And yet he goes home and maybe he's bossed around by his family. As long as 95% of the people on this planet, regardless of what they say, as long as they're genetically driven to play out a support beta role, they're going to be able to be led by the 5% who are going to tell them what to do. This is how we get war. If most people were leaders, then when another leader came and said, all right, suit up, we're going to war, and they'd be like, well, wait a minute. This war you want us to go to, it's in another country. Those people didn't bother me. They're not threatening my family. They're not threatening my crops. No, I'm not going. The ability to go to war rests fundamentally on the fact that most men will follow. The ability to have the structure that we see now in society, where you have a few people at the top lording it over everyone at the bottom and suppressing them with taxations and with oppressive laws, is fundamentally an emergent behavior of this base issue. So yes, it's incredibly important at a gathering like this for thought leaders to get together and share ideas about what we need to do to create a philosophy of freedom that we can all get behind. But it's also important that we change, that we hack that programming that most of us carry to some degree or another, so that at a fundamental level, we just don't get bossed around anymore.
It's really interesting. And it ties right into the anarchy because it has to do with, so basically they're manipulating the numbers that would happen naturally by just the way that our society is, basically the power structure. So there's an unnatural amount of followers, basically what you're saying, right?
And I believe it's more than the 20-to-1 that we were genetically programmed to be. Because now you have things like gender-bending plastics that we're exposed to in our food and our water. You've got social media programming, things like, take a look at The Incredibles. That movie, I didn't watch it, but I saw the preview. And you have the great hero character, right? And he's being told that now he should burp babies, change diapers, and do things that aren't part of his heroic path. So our younger generation is growing up being told that masculinity is toxic. And I can understand somehow a little bit where this comes from, because there is a toxic version of the alpha male, right? And it's the same for a female. If you've got a really beautiful woman in high school, she's a cheerleader, right? She's a head cheerleader. That great beauty that she has, she might get seduced by it. She might get corrupted by it. And the fact that she can have her way with men and often with other women that look up to her. And it can be a very difficult thing for a woman who's not really evolved to have that kind of beauty, because she can end up becoming really egotistical and very dark. And it's the same for a guy. When you see these 1 out of 20 men that are naturally alpha, that their genes are calling them out to positions of leadership, unless they're very evolved as men, they can end up using it to seduce women and intimidate other men. It doesn't bring out the best in their personality. So we don't have a lot of role models for what I would call a king, an alpha male who is noble, who is impeccable, who is honorable. Even if you look to mythology, you don't always see it. For instance, the great heroes of mythos, Hercules, was a murderer and a rapist, because that's what they respected, that kind of strength back then. So what is it to be a man? What is it to be a king? How do you start raising that up in yourself? Now, if you've got a pack of apes, or say a pack of wolves, at some point in time, the alpha ape, the silverback, the alpha wolf will die, right? Some other ape or wolf has to step up, has to take that role of leadership. So genetically, they have the ability to go into a position of leadership. I believe all men have this genetic ability, when the conditions are right, to manifest that part of them, that kingly leadership part of them, that genetically they would not be triggered to manifest otherwise. It's you've probably heard of the term epigenetics.
Yes.
So I believe that there's an epigenetics to leadership, and if we can do a few changes to the way we talk to others, the way we talk to ourselves, the way we behave, the way we interact, the way we even hold our bodies, that we can epigenetically trigger that leadership. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. They did a study where they took a guy and they put him into a fetal position as if he's inside a womb. And they checked his blood testosterone, and it was low. And they said, all right, stand up, put your arms outstretched like you just won the heavyweight title, or you just crossed the finish line first, right? And then they checked his blood. Testosterone was high. Same man. That's epigenetics, right? He was able to, just by changing his posture, change his neurochemistry. And when he changed his neurochemistry, he changed his attitude. He changed his behavior.
Just by putting his hands up like a champ.
Well, what they did is they put him in the extremes of both positions. The extreme beta position is crouched up on the ground, fetal position, right? Don't hit me anymore, right? And the extreme alpha position is arms out raised, legs spread apart, chest open, shoulders back, head up, and just his body language alone. So one of the things that's really important, if we're going to become a nation of great men, a nation of kings and queens, we've got to be mindful of our body language, right? So let me walk you through what I think are the ways epigenetically that we can start to bring this more out in ourselves. And even if you are an alpha guy, right, there may still be some things that we do that are beta mannerisms that we picked up by an oppressive father or an overbearing situation where we learned how to submit under certain circumstances to a male or a female. So let's go through these. What we want to move away from is the fetal position. We want shoulders back, chin up, arms open. What you'll see in a lot of men is you'll see them put their hands in their pockets a lot. Now, There's a thing called swaddling. Have you ever heard of this with a baby? Right. So if you take a baby and you wrap it up tightly in a blanket so it can't move, it calms the baby down. What it's doing is reminding the baby of what it was like to be wrapped up in the womb. Now, when you see a guy that's crossing arms and crossing legs and going fetal and putting his hands in his pocket, fundamentally, he's swaddling. He's saying to himself and others at a subconscious level, I don't really feel safe or comfortable or competent in the world. I'd really rather go back in the womb. So it's important to monitor ourselves as men. Are we swaddling? Are we doing that? Right? Another thing you'll see guys do is they'll fig leap. They'll cross their hands over their groin. Now this is a throwback from what happens in the ape community. When two apes are fighting for dominance, the loser has his testicles torn clear off his body, often killing him, but certainly keeping him from procreating, because it's the alpha that gets to have the sex, right? So what you'll see a lot of guys do is, without even knowing it, they'll start putting their hands in front of their groin. Other things that are along these lines would be oral fixations, with your mouth. That's wanting the tit again. That's wanting to go back to the 2-year-old. It's better than wanting to go back to the womb. Now you're saying, I don't mind the womb, the world so much, but can I have the tit, please? Right? So, letting the oral fixations go. So understanding how to walk and how to move so that you are properly manifesting epigenetically these things. And for guys that have a hard time with this, right, who know that this is an issue they have, one thing they can do is try walking in an area like you own the place. You're in a hotel, it's your hotel, these are your guests. You walk in a restaurant, that's your hotel, that's your restaurant, and these are your employees. It's a psychological exercise to get you to see the other side of the equation, right? It's not to be cocky, but it's to get you comfortable with feeling a sense of pride and leadership. Now, another one that's an issue is linguistics. It's how an alpha talks. So, if a person complains, there is an assumption behind every complaint. The assumption is the person who's complaining is beta, because who complains to whom, Jeremy? The person who complains is saying that they're powerless in this situation, and they're talking to someone that is either also powerless in the situation and they're commiserating in their weakness, or they're talking to an alpha hoping for an intercession. So one thing is to never complain. Just get that out of the vocabulary. If there's something that's a problem, deal with it, but don't complain, right? Another one is being defensive. A lot of toxic alpha guys, what they'll do is they like to interrogate, and women will do it too, toxic women. They'll interrogate as a form of communication. Never let somebody interrogate you. And you know that they've let you, that you've accepted that invitation to be beta if you start defending yourself. If someone interrogates you, rather than defending yourself, simply say, don't talk to me like that. Nobody interrogates me. So we got defending, we've got complaining, we've got explaining or excusing or justifying, right? Who justifies to whom? The beta justifies to the alpha. Please don't hurt me. There was a good reason I did that, and here's what it is. Don't be mad at me, right? If you have to justify yourself, then you screwed something up. And let's talk about what to do when you screw something up, right? Because none of us are perfect men. But if you haven't screwed anything up, and someone tries to get you to justify what you've done, you're under no obligation. I've got to explain myself to you. So what happens when you do have to explain yourself to someone? What happens when we screw up, right? So there's two kinds of apologies that you can make. I call them hard apologies and soft apologies. A hard apology is when you've made a tactical error. You're out hunting, you step on a twig you should have seen, makes a noise, spooks a deer. My bad, right? A soft apology is you've hurt someone's feelings, right? You were the older brother. You dominated your younger brother. You made him feel small and uncomfortable. And you go to him and you're like, younger brother, I'm sorry I hurt you. Won't do that again. So knowing the right kind of apology and the right timing is part of what it takes to be kingly. You don't offer a soft apology when a hard one is appropriate. Hey, that was a tactical error. My bad. If someone keeps asking for an apology over and over again, that's a beta invitation. They're saying, hey, I want to keep ragging you and put you on the defensive. So you make the right apology one time, and then that's it. And if they ask you for more and more apologies, you look at them and you say, hey, wait a minute. I gave you your apology. Let's move on. So language is a really important thing. You also see a lot of betas self-deprecate and crack jokes, right? So clearing that out of one's speech. I'll give you an example. Let's say someone goes to a restaurant, and a restaurant is a great place for a beta person to practice because they're already alpha to the waiter. Rather than saying, I would like to have a steak and could I get a glass of wine? I would like and could I and may I all imply you might not get it. Right? So instead say, I'll take a glass of wine and I'll have a steak. If you're asking permission for everything, who are you asking permission from?
Obviously, someone that you perceive to be more powerful than you.
Right, right. So there's another part to this I want to get into. And this is about what's called social play. Anytime men get together, there's going to be a little bit of a jockeying for position in the pecking order until it sorts itself out. It happens usually subconsciously. Now, the way a toxic alpha, the way a tyrant rises, is by pushing other people down. They rise by pushing others down. And there are men, and you'll see it, they're going to try to make you submit. They'll stare at you to try to make you lower your eyes. You know, they'll shake your hand really hard. They'll kind of act in a very oppressive way. In order to rise to kingship, you don't have to fight anyone. You just have to decline all of their beta invitations. And I'll give you an example. I was in a nightclub with my wife at the time. And we met another couple. They came over. And the guy comes over and, shakes my hand in a very dominant way. He takes my hand and turns it this way and squeezes it, right? It's always the dominant ape with the palm down. So I turned it back correctly again. He was not aware that he was trying to dominate me. He's so used to it. The guy was 6'5" and 250 pounds. And he was expecting subconsciously that when he looked at me, my eyes would lower, because locking eyes between a man and a woman is courtship. Locking eyes between two men is an introduction. It's combat, right? If there's a bear coming at you, you don't stare at it because animals know that you lock eyes. It means you want to fight. So I kept declining his invitations, right? I refused to look down. I refused to be coward. I kept my body language strong. And he came back 3 times over the course of 5-10 minutes, each time trying to bow me and make me submit again, unaware of what he was doing, right? Not mad at the guy. And each time I simply declined it. Body frame proper, language proper, meeting him, right? By the 3rd time, he had so much cognitive dissonance in his head. He was so uncomfortable and confused that this 5'10", 160-pound guy was completely refusing all of his requests to be submissive, that he left in a state of complete and utter confusion. And we never saw him again the rest of the night.
Wow.
So you don't have to be a toxic jerk to hold your own. All you got to do is refuse to accept anyone else's beta invitation. There's a thing called social play. And we see this in the animal kingdom. You'll see dogs play biting each other, and you'll see all animals, they do this. They play wrestle. And there's a couple of rules to the social play. One is nobody gets hurt. 2, if one animal or one person does hurt another, apologize or own up to it. If you're hurt, call it out and switch sides. Animals that learn proper social play have less violence done to them and are less violent themselves and have much better luck finding a mate. Animals that don't get social play, these are the guys that allow themselves to get bullied at school until they either commit suicide or kill a bunch of people. Because they didn't understand how to deal with that. They never learned it. A lot of the school shooters and the people that go up in the towers and shoot at colleges, these are people that when you look at their history psychologically, they never had social play. So if you're a dad or a dad-to-be, roll on the ground with your kid. Let them get on top. Then you get on top. Then they get on top. Then you get on top. You play around. You teach them how to fight without them even knowing it. And more important, as important as that, you teach them how to deal with people shoving and getting in your face, right? Because the bully likes to go after the person who gets paralyzed because they don't understand how to respond.
It's interesting because I actually do that with my daughter, and I thought it was just because I'm a boy. It actually comes very natural to me and her as well. And I just thought that was because she's the only child. But yeah, me and her play like that, and we go back and forth. With me grabbing her, then she gets loose, then she gets on me. So it's really interesting to hear you bring that up.
I'm glad you do it. You're a good father. It's kind of healing as a dad. If you're a dad and you didn't do that with your kids, even if your kids are 20, go ahead and do it. Say, hey, no, son, I learned something. I never social played with you. Come on, I'm going to roll on the ground with you. And these are the rules. When we can raise a nation of men and women who have the understanding of how to respond to bullies, whether it's in the schoolyard, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's the bully of governments, that's when we're going to have freedom.
So let's go a little bit more further into that. So how do you think that would help manifest in the real world with freedom, anarchy? How can social play help people basically not be slaves and not be beta? Just through, is it kind of like reprogramming their minds so that way they're not as easily misled and I guess subjected to some sort of form of control?
I know that the dominant line of thought here is that if we just teach people and point people out their own submission, that will free them. And that's not my experience. That happens intellectually. When you change your body language, when you change your own beliefs, and you start raising your testosterone naturally, you don't have to be a political scientist to know when someone is bullying you. I'd rather have a nation of men who might not have read great works of libertarian freedom, but simply couldn't be pushed around, than a whole nation of men who had theoretical knowledge of freedom, down to the minutia, but they themselves didn't manifest it when it push came to shove.
That makes a lot of sense, actually, because it doesn't really do us much good if it's just in our heads. If we allow ourselves to be bullied over, in some fashion by virtually everyone.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way we can have a nation of free men, people, if basically, I guess, like a lot of people call people the sheeple.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of explains that concept a little bit, but gives a solution as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great because it's something that people can do themselves. They don't need government to do this. People can start becoming aware and just changing a few habits that change the chemistry in your body, and change the way that you feel, change your health, and which that's going to change everything, really, because it will completely shift the stars for you.
I believe this is part of the agenda of destroying the gender in our country. Now, granted, there seems to be a pattern that at the decline of every civilization, you start to see androgyny, right? Take a look at the statues in Greece and Rome, right? Going from the voluptuous women and powerful men towards these androgynous states, because the female energy is to nest and nurture, and the male energy is to provide and protect. And if they can destroy that, if they can get men who won't protect, if they can get women that won't nurture, and won't inspire their men to go out and do something, and won't give them a good nest to come home to when they've been coming back from battle, then there's nobody there to do anything to stop them. Now, in the same way that most men are genetically programmed to be followers and have to work that out, women are genetically programmed to be attracted to the 5%. When you see a woman that's cheated on her nice guy, the friend zone man, right? And she goes with this jerk. And the nice guy does not understand. He's done everything for this woman. What he hasn't done is he hasn't been a leader. He hasn't been alpha. And even though the jerk across the street is a jerk, he's an alpha jerk. And she might not understand why she finds him attractive, right? So to help our women be happy, right? Be the man that she's attracted to. Be that king that she wants.
The transgender movement just keeps popping in my head. You know, it's coming from all angles, where they're even pushing for parents to not decide the child's gender based on their genitalia. So this is all, and even going down to A Brave New World.
Yeah.
That was kind of how they were making the people. The people didn't procreate. The government controlled that whole process, and it seems like that's what's happening right now. And with the transgender movement on the rise, it seems like it's going right in that direction, which makes your message that much more important. Because honestly, it's something that I've never really thought about or even heard about until meeting you.
Yeah, we have a great opportunity to turn this place around. It's not serving us anymore to have this programming running. And it doesn't take much to change it, but it's not just an intellectual shift. Your whole body's got to come along for the ride. Your testosterone's got to come up. Do you think anybody could have lorded it over the Spartans? Right? Okay. They didn't necessarily have to be well educated, but nobody was pushing them around. You know?
Good point. Yeah.
When when the armies came, was it Cyrus? I forget the name. When the armies came, and they were at I think it was Thermopylae. I don't know my history. And they were fighting the 300 against the million, right? They didn't send a philosopher out there to try to convince somebody, right? They just stood their ground. And that's what it takes. It takes a nation of men who are going to stand their ground. On the topic of men and women, I'm going to share with you two blunders I've noticed that we make as men with women. The first blunder is, if we were to be socially submissive in front of our woman, publicly to another guy, and if you don't know the rules, it's likely to happen at least to somebody, right? We'll lose respect in her eyes. She's like, wait a minute, he's not the alpha I want. And that can be stressful to a woman subconsciously, and part of the reason behind that is every woman knows that the world is full of predator men. She needs to know that her man can take care of business. If something comes down the road, you're at the wrong place at the wrong time, she can walk confidently with her man because he can handle himself. But if she sees him not handling himself, it's very stressful. And what will often happen is she'll snap at the guy at home. She'll become bossy and frustrated and like disrespect him. And what the beta guy does is he thinks, wow, my woman's having a tough day. I should take care of her. So the natural response of the beta cooperative man is, darling, what can I do for you? Did you have a tough day? Can I rub your feet? Can I make you something to eat? Which is, of course, all nice, right? And it completely backfires because he is demonstrating more beta behavior. There's nothing wrong with cooperation and compassion and all these things, but in that instance, she's upset because he's not demonstrating strength. Now, the right answer is not to be super nice and not to be a jerk, but simply to be strong. If she snaps at him and he knows, wow, you know what? I probably didn't demonstrate kingship earlier. He's got to turn to her and go, don't talk to me like that. It's social play. Say, hey, no, that ain't flying. The other problem that men will do, the other mistake men will commonly make with women, is they won't lead, right? So let's say the woman, she's had a long day, and maybe she doesn't want to make dinner. And she says, babe, I'd like to go out tonight. Where would you like to go? Right? She's being nurturing to the degree that she's asking you what you want. Now, the worst thing a guy can do at that point in time is to say, oh, I don't know, darling, what would you like? Because now he's being feminine back to her femininity. And if instead he says something like, darling, you put on that black dress and the pearls. Be ready in half an hour. We're going to the French restaurant downtown. That's what she wanted. She didn't want him to boss her around, but she did want to be led at that moment. She wanted his strength. She wanted to relax, be taken care of. So, it's not just important. A man becomes a king, which is my definition of a noble alpha. He does it for his kids, so they can imprint on what it is to be like that. He does it for his woman, so to satisfy her, to light her up. He does it for his nation, because it's the only way we're going to keep the psychopaths from having a field day with us. And most important, he does it for himself, for his own personal growth.
So you mentioned that you have some books. Is this the topic of one of your books that you already have out now?
So I've written 3 books, and they're all free, and you can get them at spiritualsecretagent.com. The first book is The Neurochemistry of Men and Women Together. DNA doesn't want happily ever after. It wants genetic diversity. So it gives you phenylethylamine, which is 2 steps off meth. So you become addicted to someone and have lots of sex and don't see any problems with their behavior. But that doesn't make for good parenting. So then it gives you oxytocin, so you bond. But that doesn't allow you to break up and cheat. So then it gets rid of the oxytocin and brings in prolactin and cortisol, and then people either have a lifetime of sexless marriage or they go off and cheat or break up. If you want to get to happily ever after, you got to stay in stage 2. So the first book is about how to hack that bit of genetic programming. Second book, An Introduction to Kingship, that's what we've been talking about, the relationship between man to man. Third one, Purification of the 5 Elements, is about your relationship with your own mind, about how the narrative in your own mind is running, and how the hidden and unchallenged language you use to yourself is affecting the kind of life you're going to have.
Fascinating. Really glad that I had a chance to meet you and interview you. It's really been very enlightening for myself, and I'm sure a lot of people watching, so I really appreciate everything.
Awesome, man.
Thank you.